Now what, I say, what's the big idea bashing me on the noggin with a rolling pin?
Hi there, and welcome to Baseball by Design. I am SportsLogos.net minor league baseball correspondent Paul Caputo, broadcasting live from my parents' house in Wayne, Pennsylvania. It is the week between Christmas and New Year's as we are recording this right now. So I'm not in the Sunday Helmet Hall of Fame, but I am talking with great friend of the podcast, Mr. Erik Mertens, Mr. Minor League Baseball himself, Erik Mertens of the Tri-Cities Dust Devils. How are you doing?
Paul Caputo, it's so good to be back with you. I'm doing great. This is like the second time we've recorded for this podcast around Christmas time, and I feel like it's part of my annual traditions now.
I did something just now that I apologize for. I very often, I don't know why I can't get this straight. I very often call your team the Tri-Cities Dust Devils instead of the Tri-City Dust Devils. You were very gracious not to correct me, but I apologize. It's the
I did notice it.
Tri-City. I'm sure you did. You must hear it all the time. It is the Tri-City Dust Devils. And I noticed it as soon as I said it. Like I said it, I was like, oh, I just said that wrong. And so I apologize for that. You are full-time now. After just 20 short years with the team, they promoted you to full-time with the Tri-City Dust Devils.
It's been a long road.
This episode, as you say, it is something of a holiday tradition. It was 2 years ago that we recorded one of the very first episodes of this podcast about your Dust Devils, but we haven't really, and I haven't really even done this for any team yet. I've never done an episode just on alternate identities before. But you all have some great ones in the Viñeros, which I think we touched on briefly. They were around 2 years ago when we did this episode, but we've never talked about the Rooster Tails. And so I want to talk about both of those. But I also, before we get started on that, because this is, you're a personality in the world of minor league baseball. You are a bona fide celebrity. Tell me about this transition to a full-time role with the team after all these years.
It's a dream come true. It really is a dream come true. I've worked with the team for 23 years, going on 24 now as the on-field host, so kind of just a game day employee. But ever since COVID hit, like in 2020, people started reevaluating what they're doing with their lives. I just got more and more and more into minor league baseball and wanting to work full time in this field. And so I've been meeting with the front office leadership for the Dust Devils over the years, seeing if it could be a possibility, seeing how the timing is. And I'm so grateful it finally worked out. I'm the official first time ever position for the Dust Devils, the fan experience and community relations manager. And I get to show up every day, sipping my morning coffee, doing my morning prayers, and immediately start thinking about all the fun things in minor league baseball.
Well, what an amazing way to live your life. And anyone who has ever been to a Tri-City Dust Devils game knows that they are greeted by a life-size bobblehead of one Erik Mertens. I will say it was a disappointment. It was devastating to the Baseball Palooza crew. You knew we were going to talk about this.
Yes.
We planned early on our Pacific Northwest journey, which took us to Vancouver. It took us to Pasco, Washington, home of the Tri-City Dust Devils, and we went to Hillsborough and we went to Tacoma as well. And I had been talking up Erik Mertens to the whole gang. For once we had the plan in place, and sadly for us, and sadly for you at the time, you were sidelined by COVID. It got you, and so we missed out on getting to see you at a game. Your lovely now wife, Karina, was there to meet us in your stead, and she had gifts for the whole gang, and they rolled out the red carpet for us, and
good.
It was still a great experience, and obviously a Dust Devils game is so much fun. But I will say it was very disappointing for me. I was so sad that COVID got you and you couldn't be with us there at that game. The timing was such a shame. So anyway, I'm
Thank
not trying to
you.
make you feel bad about that. We
No,
will
I
be
already
very
do. You can't make me
sad.
feel worse. I
Well,
I
eh,
I was seriously in the 23 years of working for the Dust Devils, I have very, very few regrets. Like very few moments stand out as sad or negative. I mean, I've been so blessed. It's all grace and it's all good things. But on that very short list of regrets is missing the baseball palooza guys because I got freaking COVID like a few days before you're supposed to be here. I was even trying to imagine, like, okay, could I come in my car and like wave at them with the window rolled up? Could I, what can we do? But
yeah.
man, and so shout out to the Baseball Palooza guys. I miss you. I hope I can meet up with them sometime. Meet up with you on the trip some year. Maybe my travels and your travels align, but
I think that is destined to happen someday.
I
And
hope
so
so.
we still had a great, I mean, I should say, get to Pasco, Washington to see a Tri City Dust Devils game right there on the Columbia River. Unbelievably
Yeah,
gorgeous part of the country. Let's talk about the
thank you.
Columbia River, right? Because
Let's do it.
this is one of the alternate brands that we were going to talk about today.
Mhm.
The Columbia River. So it's not the Tri City, it's not Pasco, it's the Columbia River Rooster Tails. And this is a
Yes.
brand that was created by Brandios. And so
Yeah.
we'll be talking to them later on in this episode. You just held up the cap. It's an awesome cap.
Thanks. And it's an
It,
audio medium, I understand, but I'm a visual learner, so I'm going to hold up the cap for
you
me.
know what? I think it's okay. I think the acknowledging that you're holding the cap, people can visualize it. We're
Yeah.
painting a word picture here. So the Rooster Tails, such a cool brand. One of these ones that some of these minor league baseball brands, like, they tell a story about a place that's pretty self-evident, right?
Mhm.
Some of these brands tell a story about a place that requires a more in-depth explanation, right? This Rooster Tail brand, I don't think is one of them to people who are not familiar with, essentially like motorized vehicle sports on the Columbia River, especially this one very specific one. You and I got to talk about this. I wrote for sportslogos.net about it. You and I got to
Right.
chat back then. I quoted you in that article. I
Yeah.
loved the explanation. What is a rooster tail? What does it have to do with the Columbia River and Pasco, Washington in specific?
This is so good. And I'm glad we're talking about these two alternate identities. I love alternate identities. And some are kind of fun, but ours are fun as well, I think, I hope. And they also go really, really deep into our history and culture of the Tri-Cities region. So honestly, either the Viñeros or the Rooster Tails could be our primary identity very easily
Hmm.
because the folks in this area in Eastern Washington know what they are and they love them. And when you're walking around town, I'm starting to see more Rooster Tails and Vineros hats than actual Dust Devils hats
Hmm.
around town. And that might be because it's the new and fun thing, But so I moved here I moved to the Tri Cities from Idaho Falls when I was 6 years old, and this is the late '80s. And I remember a few months after that, we went back home to Idaho Falls, or our old home anyway, to see some friends. I think we were picking up some more of our stuff. I don't really remember. I was pretty young, but I remember seeing one of my old friends in Idaho, and he was asking me, hey, you've lived in the Tri Cities now for I don't know what it was, 9, 10 months. How do you like it? What is it like? And so I was telling them I like it, and there's a big river, and it's pretty sunny, which in a lot of ways is kind of similar to Idaho Falls. Um, but he said, "Well, what's like the one big thing that the Tri Cities is known for?" And again, we were young kids, so what probably wasn't this articulate of a conversation. But I remember telling him, "Hey, I've lived here for about a year now, a little less than a year, and one weekend of the year they have these big hydroplane races, these big boat races on the Columbia River, and hundreds of thousands of people come and line the shores of the Columbia River. And it's the biggest thing in the world for the Tri Cities. So that's one of my very first memories of moving here, about the culture, about celebrations in town. And so this is what it is. The best way I can explain what the hydroplanes are, what a rooster tail is imagine NASCAR on the water. So just like NASCAR has a circuit of races, they have a circuit, and they'll be in Daytona, then they'll be in Indy, and then all these other places. Um, there is a racing organization, a league called H1 Unlimited Hydroplane Racing. And it's just like NASCAR on the water. And this next year, the circuit starts in Alabama, goes to Indiana, then it comes here to the Tri-Cities, then Seattle, shoots back to Detroit, then San Diego. And for the first time, I think they're doing a race up in Canada, up in British Columbia. So they go all over the United States and then some. And we're one of the stops on that circuit. We're actually known as the fastest waterway because they'll race these boats on lakes, on rivers, in Seafair. They do it on Lake Washington by Seattle. But the Columbia River, and I just learned this yesterday too. You know, the Columbia River is this huge, huge waterway in the West, and there's different dams along the river. They actually control the level of water on this stretch of the Columbia that goes through the Tri-Cities for the races because they need to raise the waterway up a little bit. And so hydroplane racing has been going on in the Tri-Cities since 1966. So almost 60 years. And it started out as the Atomic Cup because of the Hanford nuclear site out here, which is a huge part of the Tri-Cities history. But it got to be known as the Columbia Cup. And so you might be tracking this story and thinking, okay, that's cool. Where the hell does a rooster come into this story?
That's where I was. That's where I was. I was just like, I'm still, the first time we had this conversation, like I was still looking for the rooster in this.
Yeah. So if you see the logo on our hats and uniforms, the Columbia River Rooster Tails, you'll see a hydroplane. And a hydroplane is basically a boat that's built like a plane to skim across the top of the water. They go, 200 miles an hour on the Columbia, which is the fastest stop on the circuit. They will go up to 200 miles an hour, which means they will go the span of a football field in less than a second.
Holy smokes. Wow.
I mean, it's crazy. And they have 3,000 horsepower turbine engines. I mean, it's not just like a cute little boat race. I mean, this is like a sensory experience. The sounds so loud. You can hear the turbine engines from the Columbia River all over the Tri-Cities, throughout the hills, throughout downtowns. I mean, you hear it when they're here. So because they go so fast and because they skim along the top of the water, just the physics of it all, these boats shoot out this huge plume of water behind them in their wake. And it's 300 feet long and over 60 feet high. And so if you're watching the races from up on the hills or from far away, all you will see are these plumes of water. You won't even see the little boats. And it's incredible visual. But those plumes of water are called rooster tails because they kind of make this big arced shape, kind of like a big plume of feathers behind a rooster. And so if you're into hydroplane racing, if you live in any of those stops around the country and you go to these H1 Unlimited hydroplane races, you know what a rooster tail is. And to this fact, I'll wear this hat all around the Tri-Cities. Everyone loves it. If they don't know what it is, they'll recognize the boat and the rooster tail. But I'll also wear it in Seattle because they have a stop on the hydroplane circuit too. And everyone in Seattle immediately knows what this is.
So this hydroplane circuit actually also does stop. What is it, like in Puget Sound? Like where does that one go?
So Seattle is situated between the Puget Sound and Lake Washington, this little isthmus, this little strip of land. Isn't isthmus a word that you brought up in a podcast recently?
It was. We were talking.
I knew it.
It's the little stretch of land that existed, that exists in the logo for the Madison Mallards, because the Madison Mallards. There are two lakes, but their logo actually has Maynard the Ballard actually standing with his foot in one of the lakes, and they use them to sort of orient the direction that the mallard was facing because they wanted to focus on the northern part of the town. So yes,
that's awesome.
Isthmus is a word that I know because of the Madison Mallards.
And it's the only word that rhymes with Christmas, which is very appropriate for today.
It sure is. But today, recording, I don't often reveal this. We're recording on December 27th. It's 2 days after Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. So Seattle, like Madison, is located on an isthmus, but the races take place on Lake Washington, which is the other side of
Okay.
Seattle. So, yeah.
Okay. The rooster tail, I mean, I love this explanation. The actual, like, sort of almost like nerdy looking rooster, right? Like he's a little
Kind of
bit
nerdy.
nerdy because his goggles look a little bit like glasses, and
Yeah.
yeah. So, but he's got that grandiose grimace, and like I said, we'll be talking with Jason Klein. I love what Brandiose did with that. I wanted to mention too, though, like I mean, it seems sort of obvious that you said that the team went with Columbia River rather than Pasco or Tri City or whatever. But the Columbia River, is obviously super important to this area. I will say we drove along the Columbia River when we went from the Dust Devils to Hillsborough
Oh my
because
God. You went through the gorge, the
we
Columbia
did. We went
Gorge.
right through
Oh,
the gorge. We just followed the river right along the northern border of Oregon and the southern border of Washington. Incredibly beautiful part of the country. The Columbia River forms in the Canadian Rockies, comes
mhm.
down through the state of Washington, and then essentially right through the Tri-City area, and then
Yep.
along the Oregon border out to the Pacific Ocean. Huge, wide river.
Yeah.
I once said to a friend from Missouri, they were talking about some mountain in Missouri, and I was just like, I feel like, as a person who currently lives in Colorado, when you say, when you're talking about a mountain in Missouri, that you should have to use finger quotes. And they said to me, they were like, okay, but
Yeah.
you in Colorado, when you talk about rivers, you should also use finger quotes. The Columbia River made me feel this way, right? Like it was like, okay, this is
Yeah.
what a real river actually looks like. This is,
Yes.
it's an enormous body of
It's
water.
huge. Right.
And so just so beautiful, just from a purely sort of scenic perspective, but important to the region. So can you,
Yeah.
I'll just ask you about that. Like what does the Columbia River mean to you as a resident of that area?
I'm so glad you asked this because yesterday I was driving with my wife, Karina, and her dad, Carlos, my awesome father-in-law. We went to go visit some of their family up in the Yakima Valley, about halfway between here and Yakima, Washington, along the Yakima River.
Okay.
And
Home of the Pippins.
that's right, Yakima Valley Pippins, go Pips. Try to go to one of those games every year. I love it. Um, but he is one of the smartest guys I know. He was one of the first Mexican American engineers to work at the Hanford nuclear site. And he is currently a docent or a tour guide for the B reactor, which is the world's first large scale nuclear reactor, which was built out here in the Hanford site, which is just north of the Tri Cities. And is really the reason why the Tri Cities is here. Because these three little cities, Pasco, Richland, and Kennewick, were three farm towns in eastern Washington trying to make it through the Dust Bowl out here in the desert. But during the Manhattan Project, the Hanford nuclear site was built as part of the whole thing. If you've seen Oppenheimer, we were one other nuclear site out here. And
Have not yet. I've
almost,
not seen Oppenheimer and I've
I
not
haven't
seen
either.
Barbie.
Oh, no, well, this sounds like something that you could do in a day and really have your emotions twisted around.
I want to do the Barbenheimer thing at some point here, and I just
Yeah.
haven't had a full
Yeah.
day to do it.
Well, if you ever do watch Oppenheimer, it shows obviously the site in New Mexico near Santa Fe, but the Hanford nuclear site north of the Tri Cities was a huge part of this. So I know I'm kind of steering away from your question, but it'll make sense. Anyway,
We're learning the
so
history of America one baseball logo at a time.
that's right. Well, and that's why the minor league baseball team in the Tri Cities back in the 50s and 60s was called the Tri City Atoms.
Oh,
And Cal Ripken Sr. managed the Tri City Atoms. And
no
there's
kidding.
a famous photo of Cal Ripken Jr. as a little kid standing next to his dad at the ballpark in Kennewick, Washington, wearing Tri City Atoms stuff. But
I love this.
yeah. So anyway, okay. So my father-in-law Carlos gives tours of this historic site. And part of the tour is about the geological history of this area and why, when you think of Washington in the Northwest, mountains and thick pine tree forests and greenery. Then if you look at a map, especially a topographical map of Washington, you just see this huge swath of high desert cut through these mountains. Like, what the heck? Well, he was telling me the history, and I knew a little bit of it, but he's amazing at this stuff. Goes back to the Ice Age, so we're going way back. There was you might have heard of Lake Missoula. So here's another connection with another ball
Sure, go
club.
Paddleheads.
Go Paddleheads. Lake Missoula was this huge lake that was formed because of all these ice dams that were around where Washington, Idaho, and Montana kind of connect here. He said that Lake Missoula almost covered half of Montana, like the western half, which you can imagine is huge. It had more water. He said 3 to 4 times more water than the Great Lakes currently have.
Wow.
In this, I mean, it's humongous, right? And so during the Ice Age, when the temperature would fluctuate, the ice dams would break or melt away, and all of a sudden you would have this inland tsunami coming from inland racing to the ocean. And he said it was over 400 feet tall wall of water traveling 60 miles an hour.
Wow.
Just gushing through these mountains and forests that do kind of make up this area, and just destroying them and cutting right through. And so if you drive around Eastern Washington, if you go through the Columbia River Gorge, which between Washington and Oregon, which you drove along on your way to Hillsboro, you will see the effects of this humongous, like mind-boggling inland flood. But this is the best part. That happened more than once, because then things would freeze up again, and then the ice dams would break again. So time after time after time, over thousands of years, this part of the country was carved out of the mountains. And so that's why if you look at a map, you see this huge river now. It's the remnant of this Lake Missoula. And the Columbia River is the main tributary. But here in the Tri-Cities, we have the Snake River, which goes through southern Idaho, and the Yakima River, which comes from the Cascade Mountains through Yakima. And they all meet up right here in the Tri-Cities. So a lot of things around here are called the Three Rivers, like our convention center. It's not called the Tri-Cities Convention Center. It's called the Three Rivers Convention Center. We have a lot of threes around here: Tri-Cities, Three Rivers. And so this actually ties in with our other alternate identity, the Viñeros.
I thought you were going to say the Tres Leches.
Oh my gosh, what a deep cut!
That is a deep cut. That's from 2 years ago. We were.
You got to go back and listen to that episode.
Okay, the Viñeros, another great alternate brand that we touched on the first time we chatted, but it's had some time to sort of settle in. You now have several alternate identities, and so you've got this Viñeros one. How is that one being perceived and embraced as part of a sort of permanent fixture in the team's identity?
Yeah. Well, first off, these colors are fun. The Copa colors are always bright and fun. So the Dust Devils colors are pretty dark. It's navy and like this khaki, which represents the desert hills around here. So to have a bright pop of purple and neon green is really fun to have. And in fact, I think this is the first time it's being announced. Everyone, stay tuned for an updated Viñeros hat this coming year.
No kidding. So that is breaking news. That's very exciting.
Yeah. Speaking of fun colors.
All right.
Yeah, it's still Viñeros, but it'll be a kind of a refresh of the hat. So that'll be fun. So if we remember back to the history of how the Columbia River was formed and the Ice Age floods, I feel like I'm a history teacher now. It's still a desert. This place is the high desert of the inland Northwest. And so it wasn't until the 1910s, 1920s, around there, that irrigation kind of showed up in the area. And remember, the Tri-Cities were 3 pretty small farm towns, and it was a rough living trying to farm out here in the desert. But because of those Ice Age floods, we have surprisingly fertile soil here, because all of that sediment from Lake Missoula carving through Montana, Idaho, northeastern Washington came down and settled here. And remember, that flood happened time and time again. So we have layers upon layers of very fertile soil here. But the water was the interesting part, because it's the desert. So anyway, when the irrigation showed up, now all of a sudden you have vineyards and orchards start popping up around here. And if you drive, which you might have done on Baseball Palooza, if you drive between Yakima and the Tri-Cities, it looks like you're in the hills of Italy with how many vineyards and orchards there are now. It's gorgeous. So here you are in the desert, but you see all these green fields of vineyards and orchards. And if you ever bite into an apple, there'll probably be a sticker on it that says from Yakima or the Yakima Valley. And if you drink wine, and if it's not from California, it's probably from the Columbia Valley of Washington State. We are the second largest wine producing state in the country, and the fastest growing. So anyway, back to the history. About after World War II, migrant workers from northern Mexico and Texas started kind of following the crops through the seasons. And so you would start with the cotton and other crops down in Texas, and then when it got warmer, you'd move up north, follow the harvest in the Central Valley of California, and then you go up to Oregon, and they have, you know, their crops there. Well, Washington is about as far north as you can get, in the States anyway. And so these migrant workers would follow. And now the Columbia Valley and the Yakima Valley had irrigation. So we had tons of things to harvest. And so migrant workers, Mexican American migrant workers, became a huge part of our industry here, of our culture. I love living back home in the Tri-Cities now because certain parts of towns, all the signs are in Spanish, and we have a lot of rich diversity and colors and flavors and music here in the Tri-Cities. So when it was time to come up with a Copa identity, not only is Viñeros celebrating the Mexican American and Latino cultures in the Tri-Cities, but it really represents our history and our industry, and the reason why we are one of the world's leading wine producing areas. We have tons of AVAs, American viticulture areas here, is because of these migrant workers who are keeping this industry alive.
I love how the stories of these two alternate identities, which seem really super disparate from one another, actually dovetail in a really cool way, right? Like that the fact of this fertile land being created by these floods, which led to the ability for migrant workers to be involved with the production of wine, which is much like Western Colorado. I think Eastern Washington is probably a similar climate, right? Like where you don't necessarily expect wine to be a big thing, but it turns out it actually is. I wanted to ask you, I know that this is about the Viñeros and the Rooster Tails, but they're part of this larger suite of identities for the Dust Devils. And it's interesting to me because we talked the first time you were on the podcast about the fact that in the sort of landscape of minor league baseball logos, that the Dust Devils is one that people have commented, you know, could use a refresh. You kind of got that refresh with the Marvel identity, right? Like the Marvel identity is a sort of updated version of Dusty, right?
Right. Yeah.
But you have these two alternate brands plus the Marvel identity that are very highly refined, created by this high-end firm in Brandiose, as part of the larger suite. And then of course you have the original, very kitschy. That's the way I choose to think of it. It's kitschy, right? Like it's kitschy sort of early minor league baseball design. What is the team's perspective on that sort of, you know, that relationship between, you know, going to a high-end design firm to create these alternate brands while sticking with this earlier brand from a sort of different era of minor league baseball? I hope that's a fair way to characterize it. I think that because that's sort of how I think of it.
100%. And I wouldn't disagree with anything you said. And like personally, just speaking as Erik here, I would love an update of the Dust Devils logo. I think the name really works well here. You know, but you know, logo is over 20 years old now, and maybe we could update a little bit. And the Marvel logo kind of did that, but I think, you know, if Brandiose or one of these other firms, you know, updated the Dusty logo, that could even be better. And it's interesting now because here I am in the front office, so I do get some perspective of the business and the workings behind the scenes, you know.
Right.
And then I have my personal thoughts, and then here I am part of this great minor league baseball community on social media and podcasts. So anyway, they all kind of converge. I think my understanding is that there is a desire to update the Tri-City Dust Devils primary brand. I really, not just from the outside, but from internally too. There is this desire. And then we came out with the Rooster Tails 2 years ago, and that just, you know, was a huge success. We sold out almost immediately. We really have to be careful, you know, do we have enough stuff for the locals to buy, you know? And so the focus was on that. And so it wouldn't make sense to unveil a brand new primary logo right after this cool alternate. Like, selfishly, I would love it. I want more hats. I want more logos, you know. But like from a business side of things, like, whoa, we just spent all this money and all this effort putting out this really cool alternate brand.
Yeah.
You know, let's let that breathe for a little bit. And the same with Viñeros. And again, we're getting kind of a refresh of the Viñeros uniform this year. So that's kind of the
Uh-huh.
big thing this year,
All
not
right.
just the hats, but the jerseys as well. Um, and then, of course, as anyone who's into minor league baseball knows, this is the year that all 120 teams need to update their stadiums, their ballparks
Mm,
to meet the new standards from MLB.
yeah.
And we're in a great position here in the Tri-Cities because the city of Pasco owns Gisa Stadium.
Mm,
But they are an amazing partner. And so we're doing it. We are currently a huge construction zone at the ballpark because we are making those updates. And we have a great relationship with the city and the construction team. So anyway, we've got a lot of projects going on right now. And so this idea of updating the primary logo, just financially and business wise, this might not be the time,
sure.
but hopefully soon. And so
Yeah.
in the meantime, people are digging the Rooster Tails, they're digging the Viñeros. They do have a soft spot in their heart for the classic Dust Devils.
Yeah.
We're coming up on our 24th year now, and I mean, people in their 20s have not lived in the Tri-Cities without the Dust Devils, which is a
I think that's
huge,
amazing.
huge thing. Yeah.
Well, and I hope it's very, very clear that I am not casting aspersions on the brand in any way. I mean,
Yeah.
one of the brands
No.
that's over your right shoulder there is the Portland Sea Dogs, which is from
Oh yeah.
roughly the same era, created by Guy Gilchrist rather than one of the big firms, right?
Yeah.
Like, and so
That was a great episode, by the way. I love that episode.
Guy Gilchrist is a nice guy, and he's done a lot of sort of cool work with like, things outside of baseball. But that to me, like it's sort of a similar idea, right? Like it's a different era of minor league baseball branding. There weren't focus groups. There weren't, it was just
Yeah.
like, let's just create a brand for this minor league baseball
Do it.
team. And I think that's what the Dust Devils logo is, right? Like it's got this kitsch value about it. It's dated, but I think in a good way. But it's such a contrast to these two other brands that we've been
Yes.
talking about, right? Like, and I think
Yes.
that's the sort of bigger question here is just like you've got this very grandiose Rooster Tails one, this even within the context of Copa de la Diversión, the Viñeros is pretty different, right? Like it's this
Yeah.
adorable cartoon guy instead of some of the, the more, I don't know, some of there's a sort of aesthetic that you associate with the Copa program, right? Like in the
Right. Right.
Viñeros brand, I think is a little bit outside that, right? Like it's
Yes.
at least this current colorway is. So I
Yeah.
just think it's just interesting to me to sort of ask that question, right? Like is to look at a team whose alternate brands probably were a much bigger investment than the current primary brand is sort
Yeah.
of an interesting
Yeah.
approach. And not just because I wanted to talk to Erik Mertens, but it's one of the reasons that I wanted to have you on to talk about these two alternate brands because they're such a big
Thanks.
part of this identity. So
Thanks. Well, two quick things, and I know
yeah.
we need to run, but first up, and Paul, you visited the Brandios offices, right? In San Diego. This is a fun little trivia tidbit. Originally, Brandios, who designed the Viñeros logo and look as well, they had the hats as like a neon pink, a bright pink.
Okay.
And so if you ever see photos from the Brandios office where they have the shelves of hats, or if you get to visit like Paul did, you will see the Viñeros hat is a neon pink. Whereas the actual on field that I have in my hand right here is like this bright purple. The new era swatch, like color swatch that this actually is technically called sparkling grape because we
Of
wanted
course.
a Merlot color because most of the wines from the Tri-Cities area are award-winning red wines.
Yeah.
So a sparkling grape color. So that's just kind of a fun thing
Yeah.
about a little tidbit. And the second thing too is I can't remember now. So there you go.
Oh,
Whoops.
there you go. Well, we got one of two things. You know what that means? That means that we have the opportunity to revisit in a future episode to learn what that second thing was. We'll
I
have
can't
another,
wait.
we'll
I
have
can't wait.
part 3 at some holiday break with Erik
Yes.
Mertens. In the meantime, everyone knows who Erik Mertens is already, but Erik, if you would, where can people find you on social media? Where can people find the Dust Devils?
Well, this has been an honor, and I love interacting with people online and meeting them in person. So please do connect and reach out. I'm mostly active on Twitter. My handle is @it's Erik Mertens, and Erik is with a K, or you can just search for Erik the Peanut Guy. I'm on Instagram where I post a lot about hats and baseball travels. And that's Erik the Peanut Guy, Erik with a K. I also have a Facebook page for Erik the Peanut Guy. And please check out the Dust Devils website. Please reach out. We love having, last season was so much fun because Baseball Palooza swung by the Tri-Cities, but so did many, many other fun people on this online community. So please reach out.
Well, Erik, please get all your boosters.
Yes.
Wear a mask. Do everything you can, because the next time we're out there, we need to see Erik Mertens and not have him laid up with the COVID again.
Come hell or high water. I'll be there.
Erik, I'm proud to call you a friend. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I'm grateful that the first time I was in the Tri-Cities, I got to come and throw out a first pitch after dropping my daughter off at college. That was such an honor to get to do that. So thank you for that. And so I've been to Pasco twice for games. I plan to get to another. I will see you then. In the meantime, let's find a way to meet up on the road in 2024.
Let's do it. I'm proud to call you a friend too, Paul. Thank you.
Thanks, Erik. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Woo!
Woo!
All right, everyone, welcome back. Super excited to invite back to the podcast, to have back on the podcast so graciously, Jason Klein of Brandios. Jason, hello.
Yeah, we're here. We did it.
We're doing it. It's sometimes a struggle to find a time on the calendar that works, and so this is I appreciate you during your busy season making time for the podcast. It's always such a pleasure to talk to you. Hey, we're talking about, this is an interesting episode because I don't think I've done this before, where I just had an episode on alternate identities.
Yeah.
Featured the Tri-City Dust Devils themselves way back when, early on in the early days of this podcast. But now we're talking about two of their alternate identities that you created, the Viñeros and the Rooster Tails. And so I'm curious what that process is for you going into, just in general, creating an alternate identity. How much do you consider the existing brand in that, or is everyone just a new project?
Everyone's a new project. Yeah.
Okay.
We don't consider, I mean, sometimes there's limitations that you need to be mindful of when you're doing a new alternate brand of the existing identity.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, the idea here is that the existing identity is a story that the community, America, whoever has bought into, right? It's like, I get it. Like, I'm into it, right? And any kind of iteration is sort of just like an option, right? It's like, do you want, scrambled eggs or hard-boiled eggs, or, what I'm saying? Like, it just becomes like an iteration, whereas like, bacon, sausage, whatever.
Yeah.
It's like a whole new thing. And you kind of want, you want to think of this as a collection of stories, right? So you have your primary story, but then theme nights are this great opportunity to tell different stories of the community that may not be that core story. Little known facts, celebrating some sort of, ghost story, if you will, some sort of company or industry that's famous there, some sort of part of their heritage that hasn't been celebrated before. So these theme nights are great because it allows us to celebrate a little known fact about the community, and make it accessible to more fans, to the world. It's just a great program.
So the Viñeros are totally fun in this regard because, first of all, this guy is adorable. This character that you've created is adorable. Yeah. But that story that you're telling about that place is one that I think maybe a lot of people don't know about Eastern Washington, right? So
wine country,
right? Wine country. So where did the idea to do an adorable character come from instead of a menacing one, or one with wielding a baseball bat or grimacing or something like that? This is a really cute character.
Yeah, I mean the idea was, okay, we're going to celebrate wine country in Washington. And I think a lot of it too was the heritage of winemaking is connected to Latin America, right? Latin American vineyards and the idea of winemakers from Latin America and people producing wine in the area with Latin American heritage. So this idea was, okay, like, what if we were the Viñeros? So celebrate the Latin American influence in the winemaking business, And then doing the character in a way that would be, traditional Mexican style artwork, sort of like a retro kind of version of the character. So yeah, it came together like pretty straightforward. One of the things that was unique about it was we used a cap color that had never been used before in minor league baseball. It's a very unique color. So it's not exactly grape, but it has this like sort of really fun wine, color, and it's just unique in a way that's never been done before.
I actually have to say, my avatar on Zoom is me wearing that hat at a Tri-City Dust Devils game. But it was another fun one that you all did for the Dust Devils was this Rooster Tails brand.
Yeah.
And I'm sort of taken back to this one to like what you did with the Yard Goats, where you took an animal-based term. In the case of the Yard Goats, it was a railroad term, not actually literally a goat.
Yeah.
With the Rooster Tails, it's has to do with the wake of racing boats, not a literal rooster. And of course, you made literal animals out of both of those. And so the Rooster Tail is a fun one because I think that's a story that really takes some digging to get into. Like, very few people knew what Rooster Tail was just on its face. So that was one that had a lot of storytelling to it.
Yeah, obviously when you think of Rooster Tail, you think rooster. So that is sort of how we think about this concept, which is this idea of, what is the name? There's sort of two parts to it. You have the name that is the hook, right? It's the thing that it opens up, the story and gets you to lean in.
Yeah.
And then the brand is the punchline or the the story specifically. So there's this, it has to work hand in hand when you're building a brand. You need something that is the hook that gets you to want to lean in. If it's too esoteric, the general population goes, I don't understand, I don't know what that quite what that is, and so I don't want or if it's too obvious, right? It's like, I know what a lion is, right? It's like, well, then it's like, well, I don't need to see the lion. It's like, wait, did you see the logo? The logo is amazing. You've lost them, right? Like they're like, I know what a lion is. I don't need to see a lion logo. So it's a sweet spot that we've tried to get, which is coming up with a name that gets you to sort of lean in and say, like, what is that all about? And then the story, the brand, the logo is that punchline. That's an opportunity to sort of surprise the audiences, right? They think you go in one way, you can go you go a different way. So that being said, the Rooster Tail is great because when you hear it, you're like, what's, Rooster Tail? I mean, if you understand the bird part, that you could probably understand like, okay, well, that's probably, an option, or, boating, that's also another one. And so, Thunderboat races, they have a huge Thunderboat race up there in the area in Washington. And so we thought, oh, you know what? Like, what if we had a rooster, in a Thunderboat doing a Rooster Tail? And so if you were, a Thunderboat aficionado and you're like, oh man, like I got to get that hat. Well, then we open it up and then, you want the cap too to be a conversation piece. I mean, that is really, when it boils down to like, what is, whether it's the Clink Room or whether it's, minor league baseball logos, we're always thinking to ourselves, like, how do we create conversation pieces? You want, you want the cap to open up a conversation about what's on someone's head that leads to a 5-minute advertisement about whatever that thing is. In this case, the Tri-City Dust Devils. So that's one of those things where when we're building it, we're thinking about how do we create a conversation piece. And that's how we got to, the Rooster Tails.
Awesome. Well, this one definitely does invite the opportunity for telling stories and having conversations because, like I said, this was one that I did not know what that term meant. I have gotten now to speak to Eric Mertens, Erik the Peanut Guy, a couple of times about what a Rooster Tail is, and including on this episode. So, absolutely, totally a fun brand, and part of the experience for sure. I went to a game up there just last year as part of our Baseball Palooza trip, and the Rooster Tail stuff, the Viñeros stuff was all over the stadium, and I have a Viñeros cap, I have a Dust Devils cap, I've got the Marvel Dust Devils cap, and then I've got the Rooster Tails t-shirt. So I am fully branded when it comes to Tri-City Dust Devils stuff. Jason, thank you so much. I know you're busy, so I will let you go. I appreciate this, and we'll see you next time on an upcoming episode of Baseball by Design.
Talk to you soon.
Go find Brandios at brandios.com and at Brandios on all the socials. Welcome back, everybody. This is a moment, everyone, here on Studio Simon Stumpers. Dan Simon has shown up wearing a personalized jersey, uniform number 39, with Simon on the back. Sorry, 29, wearing number 29, with Simon on the back, and a sleeve patch that has a baseball diamond with a chicken on it, a rooster on it, and a foghorn, leghorn, almost-ish rooster jersey. Now, can you tell me what this is, or is it part of the Stumper?
This could be a whole separate episode of the Baseball by Design podcast, and maybe should be, but this goes back to when I decided I wanted to be a sports brand identity professional, and I needed to put together a portfolio of sport team designs. And this is a long story. I'm going to give you the elevator pitch version for now, but I think it might be interesting for a future episode. This was a team I made up called the Rhode Island Reds, and this is a logo I did. Now, this is literally 30 plus years ago, so I was not the designer then that I am now. And not only did I design this, but I sourced out this jersey. This is before we could just mock things up on the computer. We actually had to build these things by hand. So I cut all this stuff out of felt, and my friend Peter Thornburg's wife, Ginger, taught both Peter and I, because we were working together doing this, putting together this sports design portfolio, taught us how to use her sewing machine. And I sewed all of this stuff onto the jersey myself. So this is my handy, not just design work, but my sewing skills put to work.
Well, obviously it's thematic because this episode involves the Rooster Tails, but it is an amazing wardrobe change that you just pulled off here. And I think we're going to have to share images of this. What was it? The what Reds?
The Rhode Island Reds.
The Rhode Island Reds, which is a kind of chicken or a rooster, I think, right?
Type of rooster. And that we'll use that as a segue right into our Studio Simon Stumper. In addition to Leghorn Roosters and Rhode Island Reds, there are hundreds of types of roosters. There's, for instance, the Java rooster. There's a roundhead rooster. And there is even one called a frizzle fowl rooster.
Whoa.
And more, including two of the three in today's Studio Simon Stumper, which asks, which of these is not a type of rooster? Is it A, Jersey Giant, B, Plymouth Rock, or C, Carolina Cock?
So two of them are real.
Two are real.
Okay.
Two truths.
Yeah.
A lie.
I kind of felt like both Plymouth Rock and Carolina Cock could be the lie. All right. Jersey Giant. And see, now I feel like that one's the made up one, especially after a recent episode of this podcast delved into the potential, the missed opportunity for the Jersey Rockhoppers to be the Jersey Jackasses based on the type of penguin they had at their zoo. Now I've got Jersey Giants here on the table as well.
Being from, I grew up in New Jersey. I am a Jersey boy. I've mentioned living in Los Angeles, but I'm originally from the New York, New Jersey area, born in New York, raised in New Jersey. So this is not the first time Jersey has been referenced in one of our questions, one of our stumpers, and nor will it be the last time.
Well, that's good. And you know, I am a frequenter of the Jersey Shore. And so that obviously is going to keep coming up for me as well. The only sussing that I can do here is that of the three of these, Plymouth Rock is the only one that is the name of something else already. And I feel like rock is not a kind of rooster. A giant might be a kind of rooster. Cock obviously is a kind of rooster. So based on that limited amount of sussing time and effort, I am going to go with the two real ones are Jersey Giant and Carolina Cock, both alliterative, and Plymouth Rock, which is already the name of something else and doesn't sound like a rooster to me, is the fake one.
Well, though Plymouth Rock rhymes with the correct answer, it is not.
So Carolina Cock is fake?
Yes, there is no Carolina Cock. But there ought to be.
There is
To
no
go with
Carolina Cock.
The two teams that never existed would be a great matchup, the Carolina Cocks against the Jersey Jackasses.
I would pay to see that. I would. I don't even know what sport they're playing, and I would pay to see it.
Well, here's the little known facts that sometimes follow Studio Simon Stumpers. There were several players with nicknames Rooster, most notably Houston Astros third baseman and 5-time Gold Glove Award winner Doug Rader, who played during the 60s and 70s. Also, Red Sox and Angels shortstop and 5-time All-Star Rick Burleson, who played during the 70s and 80s. Now, those, and there's one more which I'll mention, but first let's talk about those two. They were both nicknamed Rooster. Sometimes I've seen that their nicknames as Red Rooster, but I remember Doug Rader when he was playing, and I don't remember it being Red Rooster. I remember it being Rooster. So you have to take everything you read on the internet with a grain of salt. But given that, what do you think both Doug Rader and Rick Burleson and Paul Caputo have in common?
Well, obviously, I think it's going to be the red hair.
Yes, it is.
And,
so that has Rooster ever been a nickname attributed to you by anybody?
It's never been no one's ever called me that as a nickname, but it is certainly something that I know that fellow gingerviduals are ascribed with.
Okay. Well, somebody who's not a gingervidual, which is a great word I've never heard before. I'm assuming it's a thing, but if you came up with it, kudos to you. Current major leaguer Will Myers' nickname is El Gallo, which is, of course, Portuguese for, no, it's not Portuguese, Spanish. Maybe it's Portuguese too.
I believed you there. You had me.
Spanish for the rooster. And apparently he got that nickname because of his hairstyle, which was, I would assume maybe something Rod Stewart-esque, hair sticking up like a rooster's, what is that thing called on top of a rooster's head? Comb, the rooster's comb.
You did it.
Okay, so there you have it. That's today's Studio Simon Stumper with all kinds of interesting things that follow.
This is why I don't ever try to prepare for these, because there's just no telling, what direction this is going to go. Dan, thank you for A, the stumper, and B, the amazing tale of this Rhode Island red jersey that you're wearing. I will share a picture of that when this episode goes up. We'll put a picture of that on Twitter and Instagram. So thank you again. And Dan, your Instagram is @studio_Simon. This has been another fun one. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.
See ya, Paul.